Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be ranking all of the era units, and these again are our past eras, so we're going to the Anniversary, Era of Andor, and now New Republic. Obviously you could say, Phil, is this way too soon, but I wanted to do this. I thought it'd be kind of a fun little thing of like, hey, this is where I see these characters fitting into the current state of the game, how good they are. We're going to be talking about them not just from the perspective of, alright, you know, how are their datacrons, but even with some of them having lost their datacrons, how do they feel, or how do they feel with their focused crons? You know, because again, I think those focused crons do significantly change the way we view some of these teams. We have a good chance now to kind of look and say, all right, how I think, even speculating a little bit on the era of New Republic, how I see them kind of fitting in. So hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know your thoughts down below, and let's get in here ranking these era characters. Alright, so we're going to start off with the actual Journey Guide characters. So in first place, I've got Rada, which this might be too soon, but we'll talk about that. I have Maul Hate-Fueled clearly in the second position, and Cassian, I mean, somebody has to be last, and I think if you look at the data in swago.gg, you think honestly to yourself, that kind of does make sense. The reason I have Maul below Rada is because Rada is designed to be a solo character. And for a lot of players in the earlier stages of the game, if you could pick one of these characters to have, you would want Rada. Because to have Maul, you need to have the Stranger. You need to have Starkiller. You've got to have a Barriss or, a Jedi and another light side online Force user. You need this entire team with him. And while you build up a lot of Cassian's team to unlock him, he still does not come close to the performance that Maul has, even now without a focused cron, while Cassian still has his. And you look at somebody like Rada as a solo, very similar to the way you'd view Darth Bane. Now, I don't know if Rada is going to reach the same heights that Bane does. I don't know that Rada is going to be soloing Galactic Legend Ahsoka Tano or Galactic Legend Leia. I'm not sure on that, right? We'll have to wait and see how he's really performing. But even if he is good enough to beat some non-Galactic Legend teams as a solo, that's a complete shifting your offensive and even defensive strategies, because now you can put more on defense knowing you've got Rada in your back pocket. So I feel pretty confident being able to kind of put them in this order and say, hey, I agree with this. Because even though Maul is killing basically every single Galactic Legend with Stranger and Starkiller, and doing some good things on defense as well, it doesn't, if you don't have those guys, he really isn't doing all that much for you comparative to what Rada as a solo character would do. So that's where I've got those three characters. Now we're going to work our way into the marquees, and we're going to go from worst to best. And again, when we say worst to best, that doesn't necessarily mean that the characters are trash. I'm looking at this from a, hey, I'm in Kyber 1. So I will try to make sure that I say, hey, these teams might be good in the mid game, but in the upper levels of the game, they're not really moving the needle. And that's okay. You don't want everything constantly moving the needle. It's good to have some staple teams that exist in that meta that, hey, Inquisitors have been good and they've gotten some upgrades, but they've been good since day one. Malicos has been good since day one, and he's kind of maintaining that place. Those things are important for the game. It's important to feel that some of your investments do last. So, with that, let's get to the first grouping here. I've got Stormtrooper Luke and the ISB, where they have lifted bad units, right? They are lifting some terrible units. You're talking about lifting Director Krennic and Imperial Probe Droid, Stormtrooper Han, Princess Leia. Like, those are not characters that I'm looking at and saying, man, they're really good. Like, I think I'm not impressed with them, again, at that Kyber 1 level. I think in the mid-game, there could be some very good utility here where there's some decent teams. One of the problems you'll begin to notice as you get further in the game, that GAC board eventually starts to feel smaller. Even though you might have to put more, like I have to put 11 teams down in 5v5, 15 teams down in 3v3. I've got enough teams left over that if my opponent places one of these teams, I've got enough to deal with them where it's just not an issue. Like I would argue like Malgus. I use Malgus against Stormtrooper Luke, and people will say, well, that's crazy. Like, Malgus is way better. Yes, but I'm not using Malgus on anything else. So it's not even a sacrifice at that point, right? And that's kind of the argument you need to think through is, hey, I'm going to set Stormtrooper Luke down instead of this team, are you forcing any different counter out of your opponent, or are they just going to use whatever they were going to use earlier? Same thing with ISB, just not super impressed with them. With the focus Datacron now going away, and even a lot of people are just using it with Ahsoka anyways. I think they'll just be one of those teams where, hey, maybe once in a while they get some crazy Datacron that makes them, somewhat good. But, mostly if you're in the mid game, you could find some use for these guys until you get better teams to replace them. Now, the New Republics, right? This New Republic era with, Stormtrooper Commander and the New Republic characters themselves. If you are a soccer fan and you know that Gattuso meme, where he's like, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. That's kind of how I feel about these teams, right? It's like potentially good, potentially shit. We don't know, right? I could see Stormtrooper Commander being similar to Stormtrooper Luke, or Snowtrooper Commander, sorry. Similar to Stormtrooper Luke, where, a lot of trooper going on. They're lifting some very bad units. I'm excited for Snowtrooper Commander. I have a Relic 8 Snowtrooper, so I'm kind of hoping he's good. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they pan out. Again, it's just a matter of, are you going to be good enough to actually make those characters tick, or is it a situation where, hey, mid-game they're really valuable, later on not so much. With the New Republic characters, they are getting a focus cron. They are going to be good. However, how good is, I think, dependent on how they operate without their galactic legend. I'm kind of looking at these characters similar to the way that Pirates felt before Maz, similar to the way that Spectre felt before Ahsoka, Hutt Cartel before Jabba. Hey, they're good, but we're missing something, right? There needs to be something to tie this team together. And I think that's kind of what I'm expecting out of them. I think the Focus Cron will do some very heavy lifting for them, but I'm not sure if it will be enough for them to feel like they will with Galactic Legend, Mandalorian, and Grogu. So that's kind of why I've got them here. It is still very early on, but I kind of have that suspicion that we're going to feel a little bit of, and then we'll get Mando, and all of a sudden everything makes sense. Now below here, I've got Chewie, right? Yoda and Chewie. I was struggling where to put this character, and I think I want to put him in this category of, like, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. This is a unit where I think the problem is, while you're lifting bad units, it kind of feels like unaligned Force users before Malicos. Like Tarful and Yoda and Chewie. It's one of those teams where you're like, all right, I don't want to completely mess around with this, but it's really not that challenging. And that's kind of what Seer and Baby Cal were before we got Malicos. They were this team where you're like, all right, I kind of need to, like, I can't mess around, but I'm not too concerned. But then we got Malicos, and all of a sudden you're like, wow, those characters are very good because Malicos is taking the best pieces of them and making them better, right? That's kind of what I think is going to happen with the Wookiee faction, is we are still one Wookiee short, because all the rest of the characters that are Wookiees, they don't really have a lot of Wookiee callouts, right? There's no, like, they're not designed around Wookiees. All these other characters were designed around the CLS team, or Smugglers, or the Old Republic, or, Resistance, like, and then you got Chrysanthemum, doesn't count. Like, they're designed not to be a Wookiee, they're designed to be something else entirely. So I think if you created another character that is designed to be a Wookiee that sort of molds everything all at once, I think you'll see a very different team, and we might feel very differently about Yoda and Chewbacca. Because you can tell they're a better team already, right? We can tell that they're a better team already. It's just, I think, missing that character like a Malicos to wrap it all up and make it feel like they are ridiculously good, right? And I think that's where I'm kind of holding out a little bit to say, hey, you're not getting quite as fair of a shot as everybody else. Now, next I have Cinta and Vel. Now, again, I'm breaking them away from Cassian, like cheating a bit here, because you say, well, you're going to use them with Cassian anyways, but the issue I have here, I'm looking at this from if you don't have Cassian, these characters are okay, but they're very reliant on Undermine. They are very reliant on Undermine, which if you use them with, say, Clea, that's not a big problem. But, 3v3 kind of becomes problematic where you don't really know where to fit them because they don't work without Undermine, so you have to put them with Cassian. They're decent characters. I just think a lot of their kit, again, is designed around Cassian. It's designed around Undermine, and they themselves cannot inflict Undermine. So if you're not using them with Cassian or you're not using them with Clea, I think it does sort of open you up to, hey, they're not as good as you think. And, again, that's kind of a problem, right? When you're designed around a, specific mechanic that isn't there, you feel a little lackluster. And that's kind of where I've got them. But again, a little bit further on the list because you're primarily going to be using them with the character who unlocks the best of their kit. Now, speaking of 3v3 problematic, I have two other characters here in IG-90 and Inquisitor Barriss. I feel this is the right place for them. They have added consistency to the top-end counters that their teams would go after. When you think about Inquisitors, they were kind of like at times you're a soft counter to beating Jabba, definitely a soft counter at Leia at times, depending on the Datacron. Barriss has sort of made that top counter more consistent. Similar situation with IG-90. IG-90 has made Aphra much more consistent against Jabba in 5v5. 3v3 for both of these characters, a little bit more problematic with Barriss having specific callouts to other units. And IG-90, you put him with Aphra, that's fine, but then you're missing out on Trip 0, you're missing out on B2, which sort of neutralizes some of the things that she needs. So I do like these characters a lot. I think they've been great additions. I just would argue that they maybe haven't fundamentally changed their teams. I don't, what I mean by that fundamental changes, you're not all of a sudden using Aphra against Ahsoka. You're not all of a sudden looking at those Inquisitors and being like, all right, I'm going to kill everything without a very good Datacron. You've added that consistency to certain things, which I think is important for the balance of the game, that there's some more challenging aspects. But I mean, you face Inquisitors on defense, people set their Inquisitors on defense with Inquisitor Barriss. It still is falling to a lot of those same counters. Maybe it's a little bit more challenging, but it's not like impossible anymore. And that's kind of why I have them here. Again, I want to be very clear. They are good units, and adding consistency is important. And I think that is very, very good, particularly with the state of the game where we're moving much more into this cycle of Datacrons are really driving a lot of the teams now. And again, we've seen this for a while where Datacrons really are driving things, but I think we're seeing more and more where the goal with Datacrons on CG's end is we're going to manipulate certain teams so that way they filter back into the meta and then they filter out and then they filter back in and they filter out. And it's about, hey, at one point in time you invested in this Aphra team, now it's really good again, while your Inquisitors maybe not so much, and vice versa. So again, I think that's kind of where I've put them here is, yes, you've added consistency, no real fundamental change. Which next I've got Clea above them both, which might be controversial to some of you, but she is the best of the Andor bunch. I would actually say, I think Clea is one of the best rebel fighters we have in the game. She is designed around Luthen, which is definitely something where he is a conquest unit, but then I look at Barriss, I look at IG-90, they're designed around Reva and Grand Inquisitor, or, Inquisitors in general, but they're kind of a, more out there farm. You look at IG-90 with Dr. Aphra, that's more out there, felt this was kind of parity between them all. But what Clea does, she has Undermine. So the parts of her kit that call out Undermine, well, she's inflicting it. And she is really just getting called out with Luthen, which I think ups her utility, because in a 3v3 scenario, you don't need Cassian to unlock her. You just kind of need Luthen. And then as before you would get Cassian, hey, you've got Luthen, you've got Clea, you can put them with Mon Mothma, you can put them with Saw, you can make a team and still be very good because of her. So I think she really was the best of that Andor bunch. And I think we kind of saw that even in the era where she was the most important unit. She was the one we got first. I've loved getting to use Clea in this game, and I think we're, she will be that one where you're getting into those 3v3 situations. You're still going to find a way to use her because of what her and Luthen can do together. So that's why I've got her here. I do think that, in a sense, this has not just added some consistency, but there are teams now that I think will lose to Clea, Luthen, and a Mon Mothma or a Saw or Cassian that would easily beat it if she was not there. Then we have the last two, which is Asajj Ventress and Darth Vader Duel's End. Now, with these characters, they have fundamentally changed the teams that they go in. You really weren't using Emperor Palpatine before. You weren't really using Mara Jade. We weren't really using Boba Fett, Sina Jango, or even Jango Fett. Or, those characters were kind of falling out of favor. They've come in and really shifted your perspective on them. I think really changed how we look at those teams. They have gotten a significant amount of Datacron help so far. I would be remiss if I didn't call this out. In the blue set, which is going away soon with the Cassian Focus Cron, you had the Emperor Palpatine level 9. That level 6 here with the when a Sith ally falls below 100% health, they gain a bonus turn. Well, Darth Vader starts the battle below 100% health, so he's starting with a bonus turn. So kind of was one of those things where, okay, this is allowing you to get that fracture off right away. This is allowing you to be a far more powerful team. You look at Asajj Ventress and you say, well, Phil, she doesn't have anything in the blue set, but she does have the Jango Fett Cron where everybody starts with payout. And that is obviously very, very powerful for her. So we have gotten some significant help through Datacrons for those two characters that I think in a way have kind of kept them in that top spot of, yeah, they have been the most impactful. But I would even say that without their Datacrons, they have really changed those characters and teams to where they are becoming something that feels a lot more valuable. Like even with Darth Vader Duel's End, being able to bring that team on offense and kind of pick and choose, all right, we've got this hatred mechanic. Okay, this team can't prevent revives. This team is, this, like it opens up the door for you to do a lot more interesting things with that team because of them. And then again, with Asajj Ventress, I have used Boba Fett, Sina Jango, Fennec Shand in 3v3 against teams that I would not have fathomed using before. But because of her Omicron and her kit, it really has changed how we approach certain battles. And I think that does sort of cement them in that top category of the best units we've gotten from the era so far. Now, what I will say here again, we are looking at this from a perspective of, yes, I have all these characters. So for some of you, you might be like, Phil, yeah, Asajj is pointless because I don't have any of the units to use with her. That's fine, right? I get it. I understand that it might depend on what your roster looks like, but coming from the perspective of someone with these things, this is the way I see these characters impacting the game so far. With some big questions, I think, being asked in this area where, all right, Yoda and Chewie, you just feel like you're short one character. Whereas with, Snowtrooper, New Republic, a little bit too soon. But I think with New Republic, we have a feeling that they are going to be significantly better once GL Mando comes to the game. And with Snowtrooper Commander, it's just a matter of, will he be enough to kind of look at, act similar to what Asajj and Clea do, where they're kind of making teams from something, or are they going to feel more like a Luke and ISB where, hey, you have a place in the game, it's just not in that top level. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are down below. I love you all. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.